Moving on. Joey Logano says Superspeedway racing is not racing because drivers finishing up front are the ones riding around in the back. Do you believe you should be rewarded for not working, is what he said. Spot on, spot off, Brett.
I'm spot off. Nobody makes Joey Logano go up there and race hard. I think it's part of his mentality, part of who he is as a person, and he's obviously had a lot of success as a plate racer. I think right now they're probably in the fastest plate cars that are out there. But I'm spot off. I think everybody's got to just weigh their own risk, right? So, if I'm Justin Haley and I'm going into this race, I'm going to race my tail off in every facet of the race. But when there's 5 laps to go in stage 1 and 5 laps to go in stage 2, I'm probably going to bail, because why would I tear my car up? Why would I wreck when points aren't that important to me? I think it's more important to get to the end of the race, because a guy like Justin Haley, obviously full-time this year, he needs to get experience, and he needs to learn the tendencies of what the other drivers do in certain situations, and they need to learn to trust him. You can't do that riding around in the back. You got to get up in there. You got to mix it up with him. But once you say there are 5 laps to go in stage 1, he has nothing to gain, only everything to lose, because the odds of them wrecking are higher potentially than they've ever been, because you're going to have – this is – I don't want to say it's the most dangerous plate race of the year, but it's the most
aggressive,
dangerous in terms of wrecks can happen, because these points have not been more important than they are for these playoff drivers. The playoffs are cramped. I mean, you look at who's out. There's 2 guys that are out by 30 points with Bell and Bowman. Everybody else is squeezed in. But let me tell you something. If Bell or Bowman goes out there and wins stage 1 and wins stage 2, they're right back in it with the points. So everybody that's a playoff driver has got to be crazy, crazy aggressive to end these stages to try to get points.
Yeah, we see, you talk about Daytona being a cutoff race, but when we get there, there's a majority of the field is going for the win, and there's usually, I think we saw this year, was 2 guys, right? It was Truex and Blaney that needed stage points. Now you've got 12 guys, 13 really if you count Bubba, that need stage points. So, the heightened, it'll tense up there. But I feel like we see this, and we see this topic every year about whether or not the Superspeedway should be in the playoffs, and it absolutely should be. I think we should run one track of every one of our disciplines in the playoffs. And we have, mile and a half. So we have short tracks, road courses, a mile track, and a Superspeedway, and they're all in the playoffs, and they should be, because that's what we do all year long. And to Brett's point, if Joey doesn't want to get caught up in a wreck because people were being aggressive, he can go back there and quote-unquote not work with the rest of the guys that are riding in the back. It's a strategy play. It's no different than every race we go to. You have different strategies. And some guys, me and Bubba, we've talked about this 1,000 times, we are on the aggressive side. Joey is the most aggressive plate racer there is out there. And we are aggressive because we feel that gives us the best chance to win the race. These guys that ride around in the back, the Corey LaJoys, the Ryan Priest did it for a while. There's a lot of guys. We saw the last race, people were making millions of dollars on the Rick Ware cars and BJ McLeod finishing the top 10. They're not going to finish top 10 if they go up there and try to race all day long. So that's their play. They might not win the race, but if you are on the racetrack with a clean race car with 5 to go, you're going to be in the top 15. You're probably going to be in the top 10. So listen, I don't understand what Joey of all people he's literally the most aggressive plate racer. So if he's talking, I get why he thinks that it's not right if he wrecks being aggressive and then these guys just collect finishes, but I can't really get on board with that. I'm definitely spot off.
Yeah, I don't know the sense that he said it's not racing, but it 100% is racing.
Yeah.
Do you see, to your point, with all of the playoff drivers really fighting for stage points, do you see them staying in the back and then going towards the front at the end of each stage, which could cause a wreck, or do you see it being consistent?
You can't.
You don't ever know, man. I mean, I've seen Denny before take the green and go to the back and ride around, and obviously, halfway through the stage decide to make his move. I've seen Logano blocking like crazy up front the whole race. I don't not see – let me rephrase that. I see Logano, Blaney, Ross Chastain. I see them guys – buckling them belts up tight as they can get them and racing every single lap like it's the last lap and trying to keep track position, trying to stay in the front. But, there is no perfect recipe. I've been very fortunate to have some success at plate tracks in my career, but I've been wrecked literally leading the race and got wrecked. I've been wrecked riding around in the back trying to miss a wreck because you call a caution out and you say, hey, spin in front of you, da-da-da-da-da. Next thing you know, a lap car with a bad spot or bad driver drives through the back of you and just destroys your car. So there is no perfect recipe. If there was, we'd all do the exact same thing. It's all about timing. It's all about how aggressive these guys are, and they're going to be aggressive.
Yeah, you can't win a race. You can't win stage points. You can't if you're not aggressive. You're not going to be able to run around the back and get stage points. That's just there's no way to go. All right, there's 5 to go. I'm going to drive back up into the front because by then it's usually 2 and 3 wide, and there's not a lot of momentum. There's not a lot of places to go. So if you're not aggressively in the top, like I think if we're like normally if I'm running 15th or worse with Bubba, and I see there's not really lanes moving, and we get to like 3 or 4 to go. To Brett's point, we bail out normally because there's just nowhere to go. And if you do try to make something happen, that's usually when you put yourself at the highest risks. I mean, if you listen, like to Joey's point about these races, and this goes across all racing. It was the first rule I learned in racing. To finish first, you first must finish. That's the last thing I say to Bubba every race before. If you listen to the radio, it's be there at the end. You got to be there at the end. And that's what these guys do. They maximize their ability to be there at the end of the race. Drivers like Bubba, drivers like Joey, we're putting ourselves at a much higher risk to try to win the race versus be there at the end because, listen, like to Brett's point, you don't know majority of the time the wreck happens up front or, mid, 10th or so. You know where the eye of the storm is. But there's no reason to knock these guys for doing what's best for them by saying they're back there not working. That's asinine to me.
Well, if I'm a fan, I won't want to miss this one for sure.
No, this will be you'll get your money's worth. But again, you got a guy saying we're not racing at Talladega. Is that going to help sell tickets? Is that going to help get viewership? No, it's not. I promise you they're racing at Talladega. It is going to be exciting. The fact that, listen, most drivers come into the sport and they like plate racing. But then once they get older and they get kids and they realize how dangerous it is, then they start hating plate racing. And I think I've said this before. Elliott in his last years driving, he said to me in the motorhome, he said, I know me and you are really good at this together, but I hate this shit. And we went out and won the race that day. Doesn't mean he loved it, right? But again, your risk level as a driver goes up of wrecking at that track, and you're out of control a lot of times as to how that wreck starts and whether or not you get in it. That's hard to swallow, but it's part of what we do. 4 times a year we do it, 5 if you want to count Atlanta. It's time for you to sell your home and make that big move. Let our friends at OfferPad remove all the worry and hassle. Get started today at OfferPad.com.